sentiamo nel dare il nostro contributo alla salvaguardia dell'ambiente. La conferenza chiude una settimana di lavori dedicati all'ambiente, che ha visto impegnati presso il Comando Carabinieri Tutela Ambientale, Forestale e Agroalimentare 3 gruppi di lavoro promossi dall'Interpol e dall'Unione Europea. Il primo contro i crimini ambientali, che ha avuto numerosi progetti per combattere i fenomeni illeciti di trasporto, che ha avviato numerosi progetti per combattere i fenomeni illeciti di trasporto, commercio e smaltimento dei rifiuti e sostanze pericolose. Il secondo sull'ECEC, il Comitato per la criminalità ambientale, istituito presso il segretariato di Interpol per l'individuazione di modelli e tendenze emergenti nella criminalità ambientale. Il terzo, sul progetto TECUM, per la standardizzazione a livello europeo delle metodologie di contrasto alla criminalità ambientale. In questi 2 giorni si alterneranno sul palco alte cariche istituzionali e della UE, rappresentanti di enti governativi stranieri e di organismi internazionali che operano a favore della tutela dell'ambiente, docenti universitari ed esperti di settore, rappresentanti di associazioni ambientaliste e rappresentanti delle forze di polizia, tutti prestigiosi relatori che sicuramente ci consentiranno di approfondire questa conoscenza e di perfezionare la prevenzione e il contrasto al crimine ambientale. Il primo panel stamane verterà sui cambiamenti climatici e le sfide ambientali, con particolare attenzione agli scenari internazionali, alle principali minacce che interessano il pianeta e le risorse naturali, agli impatti sul benessere collettivo e all'uso sostenibile delle risorse. Il secondo panel, nel pomeriggio, si concentrerà sul tema della deforestazione e dell'illegal logging, che rappresentano i maggiori fattori di rischio per le foreste. L'accelerazione dei cambiamenti climatici provocano perdite di habitat vitali per le specie protette e forti ripercussioni negative sulle popolazioni che traggono sostentamento dalle risorse forestali. Nel terzo panel, domattina, saranno affrontati i temi dell'agricoltura sostenibile e della fame nel mondo, analizzando le possibili scelte a favore di un'agricoltura con un minore impatto ambientale per la promozione del commercio equo e solidale. Le relazioni saranno seguite da una prestigiosa tavola rotonda nella quale, come nel 2016, si confronteranno rappresentanti di associazioni ambientaliste che apporteranno al dibattito informazioni, linfa e contributi davvero interessanti per chi ha a cuore la tutela dell'ambiente in ogni sua espressione. A suggello dell'impegno dell'Arma nella protezione dell'ambiente, nel corso della conferenza, nella giornata di domani, verrà sottoscritto un protocollo d'intesa tra Arma dei Carabinieri ed Olaf, e saluto qui il dottor Kessler, che è il massimo rappresentante, per il contrasto alle frodi comunitarie nel settore dell'agricoltura. Nei giorni seguenti verrà stipulato un importante accordo già negoziato tra Arma e FAO per la reciproca collaborazione nelle attività di tutela forestale, ambientale e agroalimentare, con particolare riferimento all'assistenza tecnica che l'Arma potrà fornire ai paesi in via di sviluppo. Anche gli atti della seconda conferenza formeranno oggetto di un supplemento speciale del trimestrale online Rassegna dell'Arma dei Carabinieri, edito dalla Scuola Ufficiali. Rivolgo un ringraziamento sentito e un vivo apprezzamento a tutti coloro che hanno partecipato all'organizzazione e alla realizzazione di questo evento, e in particolare ai Carabinieri del Comando Generale e della Scuola Ufficiali, ai protagonisti della conferenza, nonché a chi seguirà qui e in streaming sul sito istituzionale dell'Arma i lavori di questi 2 giorni. Un riconoscimento particolare ai commilitoni del ruolo forestale, del nostro nuovo ruolo forestale, da poco entrati nella grande famiglia dell'Arma, il cui contributo professionale e umano sta consentendo di accrescere potenzialità e capacità della nostra istituzione. Ringrazio, infine, il direttore del National Geographic Italia, dottor Marco Cattaneo, per aver concesso le straordinarie fotografie con le quali è stata allestita la mostra Save the Planet, che nel corridoio universitario antistante quest'Aula Magna costituisce prestigiosa cornice alla conferenza, e invito poi, durante gli intervalli nella giornata, chiunque non l'avesse ancora fatto, a visitare questa interessante mostra. Grazie e buon lavoro.
Ringrazio il signor Comandante Generale e passo ora la parola per i saluti iniziali al dottor Gianluca Galletti, Ministro dell'Ambiente e della Tutela del Territorio e del Mare. Grazie, signor Ministro. Il microfono è acceso.
Grazie, ringrazio in particolare il Comandante Generale del 7 per questa iniziativa di confronto e approfondimento che conferma davvero la grandissima sensibilità culturale dell'Arma nei confronti delle tematiche ambientali. Eravamo qui l'anno scorso, ricordo, per inaugurare i lavori della prima conferenza e sono molto soddisfatto, siamo molto soddisfatti come Governo che l'iniziativa dell'anno scorso trovi anche una seconda edizione. Quella dell'Arma dei Carabinieri è una sensibilità e una competenza che si è quest'anno ulteriormente ampliata con l'accorpamento ai Carabinieri del Corpo delle Guardie del nuovo Corpo, e devo dire che i risultati sono stati molto buoni, a riprova che l'esperienza che abbiamo portato avanti con molta determinazione sta dando anche importanti risultati nel campo delle legalità in materia ambientale. In questi 2 giorni voi mettete in evidenza l'interesse di una visione complessiva delle problematiche ecologiche nella loro diverse implicazioni, sia nazionale che internazionale. Questo è molto importante. Voi oggi avrete un panel sui cambiamenti climatici. I cambiamenti climatici è uno di quei temi dove dobbiamo lavorare tutti insieme. Io da questa esperienza al Ministero dell'Ambiente mi porterò a casa un grande insegnamento, che in ambiente siamo obbligati a lavorare tutti insieme. O vinciamo tutti o perdiamo tutti. Uno da solo non ce la può fare. I cambiamenti climatici ci chiamano davanti a questa grande sfida, a collaborare tutti i paesi del mondo. Il grande insegnamento che ci viene dal grande accordo di Parigi 2015 è questo. In matematica si chiama il dilemma del prigioniero. O si vince tutti o si perde tutti. E io credo che anche lo sforzo che voi fate in questi 2 giorni di lavorare tutti insieme sia apprezzabile proprio per questo, perché avete capito il grande messaggio in campo ambientale. Bisogna lavorare insieme, istituzioni a livello nazionale, istituzioni a livello nazionale, e sono contento che anche le polizie a livello internazionale abbiano compreso bene il messaggio, insieme per un grande risultato in campo ambientale. Primo di tutto quello di combattere i cambiamenti climatici, che sono la vera minaccia al nostro pianeta nei prossimi anni. Noi in Italia abbiamo già intrapreso in maniera forte il messaggio che ci viene da Parigi. Il messaggio che ci viene da Parigi ci porta verso una strada obbligata, che è quello di cambiare il nostro modo di produzione, ma anche cambiare la nostra vita. È questo che ci richiede Parigi 2015, è questo che dobbiamo fare se vogliamo cogliere gli obiettivi a cui ci siamo impegnati a Parigi 2015. Cambiare l'economia, sì, passare dall'economia lineare del XX secolo, del Novecento, alla economia circolare del XXI secolo. È questa la sfida che abbiamo davanti. L'economia lineare, quell'economia che consuma meno materie prime, che produce meno rifiuti, ma proprio perché è nuova ha bisogno anche di strumenti innovativi per la prevenzione e per il controllo. E io credo che noi dobbiamo cogliere questa sfida. La sfida noi l'abbiamo colta in questi anni con l'introduzione nel nostro codice penale degli ecoreati. Io vado molto orgoglioso di quella norma, credo che abbiamo dato un messaggio di civiltà del nostro Paese. Oggi abbiamo una delle norme più avanzate in Europa, i risultati monitorati in questi 2 anni ci dicono che sta funzionando, non escludo che andando avanti avremo bisogno anche di un monitoraggio di quella legge, ma oggi non possiamo che dirci soddisfatti sia per il messaggio culturale che abbiamo mandato, sia per i risultati che stiamo ottenendo di quella norma. Quella norma dice una cosa molto semplice, che è finito il tempo di chi inquina paga solo. Oggi chi inquina va anche in galera, perché l'inquinamento è un delitto contro il Paese, contro l'umanità, contro il pianeta e come tale va sanzionato. Abbiamo anche portato avanti un altro provvedimento a cui do molta importanza, che è la revisione del sistema agenziale in Italia. Per troppo tempo noi abbiamo avuto un sistema dei controlli in Italia troppo differenziato da regione a regione. Abbiamo regioni che lo fanno con molta determinazione, con molta competenza, con molta professionalità, abbiamo regioni che sono più deboli nei controlli. Abbiamo comunque controlli che sono differenziati da una regione all'altra. Questo porta non solo a una minore incisività dell'azione dei controlli, ma porta anche spesso a disorientare gli imprenditori e i cittadini che sono invece tenuti al rispetto di quelle norme, perché sono troppo diverse tra territori che invece fra di loro sono contigui. Allora quella riforma ci serve proprio per dare più incisività e più uniformità a quei controlli e chiama anche l'ISPRA, l'Istituto di Protezione ambientale, ad avere una funzione più forte tecnico-scientifica di aiuto alle agenzie locali nell'espletamento della loro funzione. Credo che questo sia un altro strumento che ci aiuterà molto nei prossimi mesi ad avere un sistema dei controlli più incisivo. Credo insomma che stiamo andando nella direzione giusta, voi ci date una mano anche con non solo tutti i giorni nell'attività che svolgete a favore della protezione dell'ambiente, ma oggi ce la date aprendo la vostra visione a una visione internazionale che non può far che bene a voi e a tutto il Paese. Grazie.
Grazie signor Ministro, grazie per le sue parole e ora darei la parola al Dottor Maurizio Martina, Ministro delle Politiche Agricole, Alimentari e Forestali. Grazie.
Buongiorno a tutti, signor Comandante Generale, autorità tutte, grazie di cuore per questo secondo appuntamento qui, molto rilevante per tutti noi. Credo che consolidare l'idea di una conferenza internazionale sull'ambiente da tenere in relazione con altri corpi, altre esperienze, per noi sia molto qualificante. La iscrivo questa esperienza nell'ottica delle tante eredità che il Paese ha potuto generare anche grazie all'esperienza importante che insieme abbiamo voluto e vinto nel 2015 in particolare con l'Esposizione Universale di Milano. Non posso far altro innanzitutto che ringraziarvi e ringraziare in particolare appunto l'Arma dei Carabinieri e il Corpo Forestale dello Stato per il lavoro straordinario fatto in questi ultimi mesi, diciamo pure in questi ultimi 2 anni, dove la costruzione di questo progetto avanzato di integrazione, riorganizzazione e rafforzamento dell'Arma dei Carabinieri e del Corpo Forestale dello Stato nella massima unità possibile di energie, competenze, organizzazione, credo che vada valorizzata fino in fondo per quello che è una grande sfida di ammodernamento dei sistemi di prevenzione, protezione, repressione su una frontiera delicatissima per il Paese come quella della tutela ambientale e della tutela agroalimentare. Non è stato semplice, lo ricordava bene il collega Galletti, ma è stato possibile grazie alla caparbietà, alla convinzione, fatemi dire, del Governo e certamente dell'Arma dei Carabinieri e del Corpo Forestale dello Stato, che non senza ovviamente superare qualche passaggio stretto, delicato, hanno tenuto fede a un obiettivo che per me rimane fondamentale nella necessità che il Paese si doti sempre di più e sempre meglio di strumenti adeguati alla complessità delle sfide ambientali e agroalimentari che noi abbiamo tutti i giorni di fronte a noi. Giustamente siamo orgogliosi del fatto che l'agroalimentare italiano diventi ogni giorno sempre di più una delle leve fondamentali di sviluppo e crescita dei nostri territori ovunque, dal nord al sud. Non possiamo non porci il tema di come adeguare conseguentemente anche tutta la strumentazione che lo Stato deve giustamente mettere a disposizione del Paese proprio sul versante della prevenzione e della repressione di fenomeni nuovi che hanno molto a che vedere anche con l'esperienza agroalimentare italiana. Ci sono state innumerevoli occasioni in cui abbiamo avuto modo di affrontare insieme questo punto di opportunità e di rischi che ovviamente si ridefiniscono in ragione del fatto che in particolare su questo fronte l'agroalimentare italiano è sì un potenziale ancora inespresso, clamoroso per il Paese e come tutti i potenziali inespressi genera ovviamente anche attenzioni su un versante delicatissimo da presidiare come quello, come ovvio, della legalità, dei diritti e più in generale appunto della prevenzione e repressione dei fenomeni più perversi che possono incrociare questa grande esperienza agricola, agroalimentare italiana. Vi sono grato per gli approfondimenti che avrete modo di condurre insieme anche a tanti autorevoli presenze straniere rispetto ai 3 panel che propone questa conferenza. È del tutto evidente che per quel che mi riguarda l'attenzione fondamentale è sul terzo panel, quello che prova a sviluppare i temi dell'agricoltura sostenibile in relazione ai differenti modelli di sviluppo delle agricolture, non solo in Italia, ma diciamo da un punto di vista più generale, guardando anche allo scenario europeo e internazionale. È del tutto evidente che questo tema per me è un tema fondamentale, in particolare guardando all'asse euroafricano, in particolare centrando il tema della prospettiva mediterranea. Più volte c'è stata occasione, anche con l'Arma dei Carabinieri, di riflettere sul potenziale di cooperazione agricola che noi possiamo determinare sempre di più e sempre meglio in relazione alla sfida mediterranea, con tutto quello che ne consegue. Voi siete protagonisti a ogni latitudine di sfide delicatissime che hanno a che vedere, ad esempio, con la gestione di un fenomeno epocale come quello migratorio e non possiamo non riflettere, signor Comandante Generale, su come, ad esempio, discutere di agricolture e di modelli produttivi e di cooperazione agricola, soprattutto sul versante mediterraneo, è una chiave fondamentale per riflettere anche su questi fenomeni. Più noi riusciremo a sviluppare cooperazione in campo agricolo, agroalimentare e ambientale, più una parte di questi fenomeni, di queste tendenze, probabilmente verranno rilette in ragione anche della nostra capacità di determinare dei fatti nuovi su questo fronte. E la prova provata di questi anni ci dice che laddove, in particolare nel Mediterraneo, si sono sviluppate cooperazioni di questo segno, si sono generate condizioni di segno più utile a gestire, almeno in parte, dinamiche di questo tipo. Io credo che questa questione per noi sia fondamentale e se c'è una specificità, una peculiarità che l'Italia può offrire anche in chiave internazionale, anche nella difficile discussione europea che tutti i giorni teniamo proprio su questo nodo, è la possibilità di riflettere ad esempio sulle sfide migratorie discutendo anche di modelli agricoli, discutendo anche di compatibilità ambientali. Forse questa è una specificità veramente tutta nostra. Io non so quanti paesi hanno la sensibilità che esprime l'Italia su questo versante. So quello che possiamo fare noi per le attività di cooperazione che sviluppiamo, per le attività di polizia, di prevenzione che sviluppiamo e da questo punto di vista fatemi dire che è molto importante che si sviluppino anche quei protocolli di lavoro che venivano menzionati dal comandante generale prima, penso al lavoro con FAO, penso al lavoro anche sul nodo delicatissimo del rapporto con OLA. Ringrazio per queste disponibilità perché segnano un avanzamento progressivo della nostra capacità di incidere concretamente su alcune dinamiche delicatissime, cruciali, e di farlo con il punto di vista di una competenza e di un'esperienza nazionale unica nel suo genere che si apre alla relazione, sempre di più si apre alla relazione con soggetti di caratura europea e internazionale. Un ultimo accenno, io vi chiedo di essere protagonisti insieme a noi dell'appuntamento che terremo a Bergamo nell'ottobre di quest'anno, quando terremo la ministeriale agricola del G7 e sostanzialmente in chiusura del semestre di presidenza G7 italiano terremo il nostro appuntamento di confronto in ambito G7 sulle sfide agricole, agroalimentari globali in relazione in particolare proprio al tema mediterraneo e in relazione in particolare al nesso che c'è tra sviluppo dei modelli agricoli e in particolare della piccola e media impresa agricola e gestione sociale, politica, economica di quadranti complessi come quelli appunto euro-africani. Svilupperemo un po' di queste idee. Credo che la presenza in quel contesto, signor Comandante Generale, anche della peculiarità, della specificità, della professionalità dell'Arma dei Carabinieri, dei Carabinieri forestali, nell'ottica proprio dello sviluppo di un approfondimento di carattere europeo e internazionale sia un valore aggiunto per il Paese. Avremo modo di parlarne, ma vorrei costruire un ponte ideale, non solo ideale, direi anche fattivo e programmatico tra i lavori di questa conferenza e quell'appuntamento di ottobre che darà lustro ancora una volta al nostro Paese, ci consentirà di lavorare molto a rafforzare un nodo non semplice da gestire e da risolvere. Credo che il lavoro segnato in quest'ultimo anno e mezzo e dal lato della repressione e dal lato della prevenzione, con il Ministero dell'Interno, con gli altri ministeri competenti e con la vostra professionalità, costituisca un salto di qualità enorme per un Paese che ha sempre faticato ad affrontare, diciamo la verità, anche questi nodi, soprattutto in alcuni territori. Non è semplice, ci sono ancora ovviamente... C'è ancora un sacco di lavoro da fare, e però io sono orgoglioso che lo Stato, nella sua interezza, abbia affrontato alcuni passaggi drammatici anche degli anni precedenti, e qui ricordo in particolare l'estate drammatica del 2015 e tante morti purtroppo accadute in quella stagione calda in relazione proprio ad alcune dinamiche di caporalato e lavoro illegale, in particolare sul versante agricolo. Dopo quei fatti c'è stata una reazione forte dello Stato, e dal lato legislativo e dal lato dello sviluppo di una dinamica di controllo territoriale più stringente, e qui l'Arma dei Carabinieri è stata protagonista del lavoro di svolta e del cambio di passo che abbiamo generato, e per cui Vi sono grato e ringraziandovi per questo lavoro voglio estendere il ringraziamento ovviamente a tutte le forze dell'ordine che tutti i giorni collaborano con noi e contribuiscono a rendere il sistema dei controlli in campo agroalimentare in questo Paese un'eccellenza assoluta dell'esperienza complessiva agroalimentare italiana. Ce lo siamo già detti l'anno scorso, vale la pena forse di ribadirlo in ultimo. Quando discutiamo dell'eccellenza agroalimentare italiana, il sistema di controllo che generiamo con le vostre professionalità non è un di cui di questa eccellenza, è uno dei pilastri fondamentali e non è un caso che da più parti nel mondo si guardi anche al modello di controllo in campo agroalimentare italiano come un modello di riferimento. Penso che dobbiamo sentirci tutti protagonisti di questa sfida, sono certo che potremo andare avanti nella massima collaborazione possibile. Vi ringrazio di cuore per questa seconda conferenza internazionale. Buon lavoro.
Adesso sarebbe stato previsto il saluto dell'onorevole Angelino Alfano, Ministro degli Affari Esteri e della Cooperazione Internazionale, che ha fatto sapere che non potrà essere presente perché ha una riunione a Palazzo Chigi con il Presidente del Consiglio per l'agenda Libia, per cui una cosa importante, non è riuscito a venire a essere con noi oggi. Adesso, prima di continuare, abbiamo un commento in inglese, c'è Phil Hogan, il commissario europeo per l'agricoltura e lo sviluppo rurale, sarebbe dovuto essere con noi ma non è riuscito, ha voluto almeno mandare un videomessaggio che sarà in lingua inglese di saluto e di augurio per lo sviluppo della conferenza. Possiamo fare partire il filmato, grazie.
Ministers, distinguished representatives of international organizations and of civil society, General Commander, ladies and gentlemen, I was very pleased to be invited to the second International Conference on the Environment hosted by the Carabinieri. And while I cannot attend in person, I would like to assure you of my appreciation for this initiative. You are bringing together an impressive array of panelists to discuss environment and climate challenges. These are challenges that know no borders, and the European Union is committed to working with all its member states to provide collective solutions. Agriculture is indeed part of the solution. Forestry, which is addressed in your second panel, is also a precious resource. So I'm pleased to see that your third panel will address how best to support and protect the agri-food sector and sustainable agriculture. Indeed, farmers are our front line in the preservation of the environment, also in respect of our precious natural resources, but equally of our landscape and our cultural heritage. Italy is a very good example of the important role of farmers and rural communities. And since I become Commissioner, I have visited Italy on many occasions, including last month, when I was honoured to participate in the 60-year anniversary celebration of the Treaty of Rome, hosted by Minister Martina. During these visits, I have engaged directly with many Italian farmers and other important stakeholders, such as yourselves. As you know, the European Commission is currently working on the modernisation and simplification of the Common Agricultural Policy. However, any legislation and rules for the European, national and local level would not serve our citizens without strong partners to enforce it. In Italy, the Carabinieri Corps have always been valuable partners in this regard, supervising and monitoring the application of the rules, including in the environmental and agri-food sector. I appreciate the work you do to ensure together that our citizens benefit from safe and high-quality food, beautiful and environmentally sustainable rural and forest landscapes, and the preservation of natural resources for the generations to come. I look forward to being informed of the results of your discussions today. The Commission is preparing a communication on the future of the Common Agricultural Policy, which will be published later this year. And within this process, we want to hear from all possible stakeholders, which is why we need discussions like yours to understand what the people out there need and want. So thank you, and I wish you a very fruitful conference today.
Ringraziamo il commissario europeo e adesso, prima di avviarci al coffee break, in modo che andando a prendere il caffè possiate guardare la mostra del National Geographic Italia con occhi diversi. Invito il direttore del National Geographic Italia, Marco Cattaneo, a una breve descrizione della mostra in modo che possiamo apprezzarla meglio. Prego.
Grazie, buongiorno a tutti. Io sono particolarmente orgoglioso che la redazione di National Geographic Italia abbia potuto dare un piccolo contributo a questa vostra seconda conferenza internazionale sulla protezione dell'ambiente. Abbiamo cercato di sintetizzare in poche immagini, una dozzina di immagini, i 3 temi della conferenza, a cominciare dal cambiamento climatico, per proseguire con il disboscamento illegale e per finire con un'agricoltura sostenibile. Sono tutti e 3 temi che stanno particolarmente a cuore alla nostra testata, sia come testimonianza del presente che come anticipazione del futuro. Tra 30 anni, a metà del secolo, su questa terra ci saranno probabilmente 9 miliardi e mezzo di bocche da sfamare. Il nostro impatto sul pianeta è già visibile nel cambiamento climatico che, come tutti sappiamo, sta influendo in maniera negativa e in maniera sempre più preoccupante su quello che è lo stato di salute del pianeta, e il disboscamento illegale fa sì che continuiamo a limitare quella che è la biodiversità, la ricchezza della natura di questo pianeta. Per quanto riguarda l'agricoltura, pensate che 2/5 delle terre emerse a oggi, quindi 2 metri quadrati su 5, ogni 5 passi, 2 dei nostri passi sono occupati o da terreni agricoli o da pascoli, ovvero sia soltanto con quello che usiamo per produrre la nostra alimentazione, per sfamare 7 miliardi di persone, occupiamo 2/5 del pianeta. Dovremo cercare in futuro di lavorare tutti insieme, e io sono particolarmente lieto che ci sia questa occasione per parlarne. Dovremo sicuramente lavorare tutti insieme per cercare di limitare sempre di più il nostro impatto sul pianeta, cercare di rendere più efficiente la nostra capacità di produrre cibo e cercare di rispettare quello che resta della natura dopo millenni in cui incoscientemente, ma probabilmente per molto tempo anche inconsapevolmente, non siamo stati capaci di rispettarla. Vi ringrazio per questa conferenza e vi ringrazio per l'occasione di aver potuto mettere in mostra alcune delle nostre migliori immagini scattate da alcuni dei più grandi fotografi al mondo, vincitori di premi internazionali, che raccontano in qualche modo e sintetizzano i temi. Grazie e buon lavoro.
Grazie direttore, e adesso con un piccolo anticipo possiamo avviarci al primo coffee break della giornata. Penso che ci possiamo rivedere qua in sala verso le 10:45, per verso 10:50 iniziare un po' in anticipo il primo panel, in modo da poter dedicare un po' di spazio anche alle domande. Grazie e a dopo. I think we can start. I will present the first panel. We have Abdallah Moqsit, Secretary of the WMO UNEP Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Thank you for being with us, sir. René Castro Salazar, Assistant Director General of FAO Forestry Department. Thank you, sir, for being here with us. Ilaria Firmian, Knowledge Officer, Environment and Climate Division, International Fund for Agricultural Development, UN Agency. Thank you for being here. And Richard Charlton, former Chief of WFP's Climate and Disaster Risk Reduction Programs Unit Aid. And finally, Callum MacDonald, Chairman, Environmental Compliance and Enforcement Committee, Interpol. Moderator of the panel will be Giuseppe Scarascia Mugnozza, President of the European Forest Institute. Police officer job is never easy, but sometimes it's simple. That means we know what's forbidden and what's not forbidden. But on environmental matters, it is important to get a different knowledge and different sensitivity. So thank you for what you will do for us to teach us this one. Thank you. The floor is yours, and we stop at 1300.
Buongiorno a tutti quanti, grazie per essere qui. Good morning to everybody, thanks for coming. È un onore per me poter moderare, poter presiedere questa sessione davanti a una platea di carabinieri forestali, di esperti italiani e da tutto il mondo. E quindi ringrazio soprattutto per questa opportunità appunto i carabinieri e il nuovo comando per la tutela, il nuovo comando dei carabinieri per la tutela dei sistemi forestali, agroalimentari e dell'ambiente. Adesso mi è richiesto di parlare in inglese per anche i nostri ospiti e quindi I will switch to English, and I thank all the panelists of this first session on climate change and environmental challenges. We have a tight schedule ahead of us, so I will ask you to give your presentation 20 minutes for each of you, and then there will be, I think, some questions, and if we have time, also some final discussion. Climate change and also environmental changes, global change, is a very big, relevant challenge that we have ahead of us, and it is already modifying our life, our economy, and of course also agriculture and our food system. So it will be a very pervasive changes that we have ahead of us, a big challenge. And so we need the joint effort of the scientific community together with operational and technical institutions. But also it is very important that also the political and decisional level is, let's say, strictly involved. And from this point of view, we need also to communicate our work, our efforts, our new discoveries in research toward the general public. As this slide shows you, we have entered a new geological era, And according to the very recent decision by the scientific community just last year, it was decided that the planet Earth entered the new era of Anthropocene. It is still somehow, different. There are still somehow different, let's say, views by the scientific communities, but it is clear that the changes that are occurring at a speed that never happened before. So we can call it as a global experiment that human society, that men and women, with all our activities and economies, we are making on the planet Earth. It's not just a matter of climate change. It's a global, we can call it global environmental changes due to the changes at the atmosphere level with the growth of not only CO2 but all different greenhouse gases. Greenhouse gases even worse, that can have an impact even stronger than CO2. Land use change, so fire and deforestation that act together in order to change the extent of our intact terrestrial ecosystem, but also oceanic ecosystem. And these take action on our environment, on our natural capital. Here, I just very briefly want to show you, at least qualitatively, how biosphere, and particularly how terrestrial ecosystem, forest and grassland, can help mitigating the increase of greenhouse gases, and particularly CO2. Here we are going, this is in year 2008, and if you see, the red color in the northern part has changed, is changing to a blue and pink color. It means that the CO2 during the year, starting from May, so starting from spring, goes down by even 20, 30 parts per million. This means that every year, forest, grassland can help mitigating, absorbing CO2. And then in December, so when leaves fall, then again the CO2 level rises again. So this is just to show you how important could be ecosystem, natural ecosystem, terrestrial ecosystem in particular, and forest in helping absorbing CO2 and other greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. So the role of biosphere is highly relevant, contributing up to 50% to the mitigation of greenhouse gas emissions. Of course, we will hear much more about all of this by the panelists, but I wanted to make some few points concerning the role of the biosphere, and particularly the role of forest and agriculture on climate and global change. Just as the final information, I want to show you, for instance, an example of an ecosystem service specifically made for Italian forests. So we can exactly measure, as the Climate Change Convention requires to each country, we can exactly measure how much carbon in general, how much of the greenhouse gases can be absorbed by our natural capital, and particularly by forest. And if we value this carbon credit, this absorption, of course this value goes up and down continuously, but giving a value of about 20 euro per ton of carbon, we come up to valuing the environmental service of forest in Italy in the last few years up to 2 billion euro in terms of carbon sequestration. This is just to show you that all this natural capital, particularly forest, can have an effect on the environment, but also an effect, also a monetary effect also from the economical point of view. And all this information, for instance, at least for Italy, are provided by the inventory, national inventory of forest and carbon, and the last one is being completed right now by just by you, so by the Carabinieri and the previous Forest Service, and now the Carabinieri Forestali. So these are just a few points to show you the importance of the ecosystems and of the natural capital in relation to climate change. And now I'm pleased to give the floor to the first speaker. So please, Dr. Moxie, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, dear moderator. First of all, I want to start by thank the Carabinieri for this invitation, and on the top to thank to the General Commander and all the generals and also officials, and also all the assistants. Also, from starting point, I seek your indulgence because I am not English-speaking person, but I am just trying to speak in English, and I am seeking your indulgence. And also, I want to share with you 3 main reasons for which I am pleased to be here. Because yesterday I just come from Bonn, where we had this conference about UNFCCC conference about climate change, and we were dealing with budget, because IPCC is an intergovernmental panel who's living with voluntary contribution. And why I am here, and I'm really pleased, is to thank the government of Italy, because he's one of the governments that are helping and contributing to IPCC budget in general, and also the assistance of many experts. Second, also, I am pleased also because I am in this Mediterranean region, and it will be a good honor for me. I am also Mediterranean, and there are some information to share. The third one is I am really pleased because now you are demonstrating that the climate change area is in the hand of all the people, and everybody should deal with climate change in order to tackle this problem. So I prepared, because I understood that we have 20 minutes, and I prepared the presentation as a statement, also with some slides. And I'm also seeking your indulgence, because if I have 4 objectives. The first one, if after this my presentation, you feel that you are interested in the work of climate change and also the work of IPCC, this is one objective. Second objective, if the information you are going to get from after my presentation can be useful for you as added value. Because one aspect of climate change also for IPCC is to assess the scientific information and to provide it as help in the decision making. The third objective, if from you, in coming exercise of IPCC, we can have some names that participate in this process. And fourth objective also for me is also, and as I said, we are dealing with some fundraising. If through you, we can have a good contribution for IPCC Trust Fund. And there are 4 objectives. Now, let me start. It is a great pleasure and honor for me to address you this morning. I would like to speak to you about recent findings in climate change and the current work of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. You might consider climate change an abstract scientific topic. In fact, it touches on every area of human activity. How we respond to climate change directly affects our ability to pursue sustainable development. And this is with the title for the conference. Linked with challenges for development, it is exactly how climate change is dealing with global sustainable goals. And this is something, this is sort of exercise. At the end, you can say how climate change area are helping to manage SDGs, and this is something also we talk about challenges. Of course, poverty, food security, health, gender equality, water and sanitation, energy access, industry and infrastructure, inequality, cities and communities, life in the sea and life in the land, on the land, indeed, peace and justice, all are affected by climate change. And this is why we have these 17 SDGs linked to climate change. Yes, climate change is bound with human security. It can aggravate the stresses that lead to conflict and displacement. Indeed, the worldwide threat assessment of, and this is just last week, of the US intelligence community, which was presented last week to the US Senate Committee of Intelligence, assesses the national security implications of climate change and state that it relies, among others, on the report of IPCC. US intelligence security linked to IPCC report. You will hear later from experts who will put climate change into the context of your work. I would like to review some recent findings to provide you with a general framework. First, let me recall that the IPCC was set up nearly 30 years. Next year, we will have the 30-year anniversary. But with the main role, the main mandate to inform policymakers about the state of science knowledge related to climate change, its impact, and the risk and option for responding to it. It does not conduct original research, and this is something we should be clear about. We are not doing research, but we are assessing the wealth of published science on the subject. It is an organization of government that mobilizes scientists from all over the world to provide comprehensive, balanced, and objective information about climate change. The IPCC last report, the fifth assessment report, completed in 2014, provided the scientific basis for the Paris Agreement reached by governments in December 2015 at the United Nations Framework Convention of Climate Change. In the Paris Agreement, countries agreed to limit average global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial level, while aiming for only 1.5 degrees Celsius. This will be done by countries setting their own policies and action known as nationally determined contribution. These are intended in aggregate to deliver the goal and will be reviewed regularly. What science tells us in the fifth assessment report? Sample slide. Temperature are increasing on land and on the ocean. The sea level is rising and amounts of snow and ice are diminishing. 3 conclusions. As greenhouse gas emission and concentration have climbed, and what we saw demonstrated exactly this result. Observations and studies since the fifth assessment report confirm this trend. In March, just last March, the World Meteorological Organization presented its latest climate statement. Since the fifth assessment report, warming has continued. The WMO reports confirm that the year 2016 was the warmest on record. A remarkable 1.1 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial period was observed. And also, this beats the record already stated in the past. This updated observed warming reported by WMO lies at the center of the climate model projection assessed in the fifth assessment report. You can see the clear upward trends in this slide from the fifth assessment report. This is some of the key evidence showing that warming of the climate system is unequivocal, a very clear statement in scientific form, because it also, this affirmation, these highlights are based on very concrete and precise scientific tools. And since the 1950, many of the observed changes are unprecedented over decades or millennia. The impact of climate change are already being felt on every continent, from the mountain to the sea, in rich and poor countries. As I said before, our language, we are assisting science. But we are assisting science to provide information to policymakers. This is why we need some very high, understandable highlights. And this is what has been used in Paris. Ministers, presidents, kings, and others were not ready to read all these 1,000 pages of the document of IPCC. They just heard about these three highlights. Key messages. Human influence in climate system is clear. The more we disturb our climate, the more we risk severe, pervasive, and irreversible impact. But there is a hope. We have the means to limit climate change and build a more prosperous, sustainable future. And this is three key messages or for key information to help Paris Agreement. Another very concrete and famous finding in the fifth assessment report is this figure you have now, which this figure link between cumulative past, present, and future emission of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. This is gases in the past. And this is the total carbon to be under 2 degrees C. But till 2011, and the figure that was shown before me shows, I think, this concentration. We already used our budget, the 2/3 of the budget already. Now we have just to manage the last third. But the statistic gives that at current annual emission rate of about 40 billion gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent, we will use up the rest of our carbon budget in about 20 years. That means we should manage all this third in just 20 years ahead if we stay by emitting this 40 billion. That means we should act. And this is your title for this conference is very, important one. You should act to diminish this 40 billion if you want to push the limits. Climate change impact are projected to slow economic growth, make poverty reduction harder, erode food security, and create new poverty traps. That means they are going to compromise the SDGs. Scenarios likely to limit warming to degree C will involve decarbonization of the power supply by the end of the century, with sharp falls in the contribution of fossil fuel. Now, this is in Paris also, policy decision maker invited IPCC to provide more information to be convinced. And the fifth assessment report also points the gaps in our knowledge. That is why governments in Paris invited us to prepare a special report on global warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius, both the impact and the emission pathway that will take us there. This report will be delivered next year in time for the first review of progress under the Paris Agreement. The aspirational goal of 1.5 degrees Celsius is a particular concern of small island states threatened by inundation from sea level rise. But sea level rise also poses a threat to billions of people who live on or close the coast, raising the possibility of large-scale displacement and threatens large-scale human infrastructure. Governments also asked us to take, in particular, climate change questions around the ocean and around land. Oceans are continuing to warm, acidify, and lose oxygen. The fifth assessment report showed that warm water coral reefs are already under pressure, and 90% of them will suffer significantly with risk from global warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius. The biomass and diversity of marine fish and shellfish will be displaced and reduced at low latitude by mid-century. These threaten tourism and food security. The ocean report we will be ready by 2019 will assess new knowledge related to sea level risks and options for increasing coastal resilience in both human and natural systems. I know that we were honored by the presence of the Minister, also the Environment and also Agriculture, and this is very important. We know that you have a special interest in agriculture and forestry, and so the special report on climate change and land we are also preparing for 2019 is highly relevant. Among other topics, this will look at desertification, land degradation, sustainable land management, and food security. In 2010, agriculture and land use accounted for almost 1/4 of greenhouse gas emissions, not only behind the biggest contributor, which is electricity, and heat production, and ahead of industry and transport. In the first decade of this century, emissions from forestry and agriculture were on a failing trend. This is important because forests are a natural sink. They absorb carbon, but this is released when trees are cut down. That deforestation is against the sink aspect, which is why deforestation is a challenge for addressing climate change. We also want to improve our understanding of the links between the deployment of bioenergy and land use and food security, one of the few areas where there may seem to be a conflict between mitigation climate change and sustainable development. Science can offer policymakers valuable insight and understanding. Also, in 2019, we will update our methodologies so that countries can report their emissions in line with Paris Agreement on the basis of the best science. And next year, we will hold a workshop on climate change and cities to encourage research in this important area. Cities, where a majority of the population now lies, offer particular challenges and opportunities in regard to addressing climate change. The full 6th assessment report, including 3 working group contributions in 2021, will be completed with a synthesis report by 2022. This is in good time for the first global stocktake under the Paris Agreement the following year. That means, if you remind that special report 1.5 will be delivered in 2018, just before the first revision about the ambition, but also the 6th assessment report will be in time to inform the global stocktake. We need to assess the new observations and the research into why emissions have flattened over the past few years while the global economy has continued to grow. We need to know whether this is the start of the trend and what are the prospects of bending the curve. Science already tells us there is a need not to be a sort of trade-off between addressing climate change and pursuing sustainable development. I think we should handle this. Without climate change science, we can compromise sustainable development. Now that we have a good understanding on the fact of climate change and its causes, we want to put more of a focus on solution in our coming reports, even as we continue to advance the basis of science. Now, of course, after the 5th assessment report, science we understand. Now it is time for providing options. And IPCC are not telling governments choose this option. IPCC is just providing options, and it is for the government to take the suitable option. Okay. The misunderstanding how countries and communities, businesses and households take decisions, this is what motivates them to take action. And once again, action, action. And this is exactly in line with your title. It means a better understanding of cost and benefit of action and the cost of inaction. And also, just I want to inform you that in Addis Ababa, just 2 weeks before, we did have this COP meeting about the whole document, the whole cycle. And of course, what new issue was about how to make evaluation of the cost of benefit. And it is clear, if you don't do nothing, you should face some negative impact. And this is something, some statistics, some metric to be taken in consideration. You often see the expression, business as usual. This is the money scenario, business as usual, for not taking action on climate. Businesses will be very far from usual in the world of no mitigation, which could see temperature rise by an average of 4 degrees Celsius more over the century. You cannot pursue economic development by relying on high carbon technology. Action to limit climate change have a positive impact on domestic economy and help improve human well-being. Thus, they can be a force of peace and stability. And just I will finish by one word. If, and this is something which is critical, if some countries who have already difficulty to adapt to variability of climate change, how they can adapt to changing climate, first. In countries where if you let everything, if you cannot diminish, you cannot limit emission of greenhouse gases, sometimes we cannot adapt. We cannot adapt with a scenario where the temperature is, the anomaly of temperature is 4 degrees. Of course, in anomaly about 2 degrees, we can have some window of adaptation. But when things are worse, then there is no means to adapt. We cannot adapt anything at 4 degrees Celsius as anomaly. So thank you very much for your attention. I'm sorry if I was long, but it was very useful possibility to share with you the work of IPCC, and I will be really happy if you, after the presentation, you'll be interested to embark in the IPCC work, as I said, on all the aspects. And once again, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Moxit, for a very interesting and I would say very updated latest information about the activities of IPCC and the future actions that have to be taken. I think that some of your points are particularly relevant also for the audience of today. You stress the fact that IPCC is basically assessing the information coming from the scientific world, and the IPCC is providing this assessment for the decision to be taken by the political level, by the governance level, and this is particularly relevant for the let's say carabinieri forestali, because they will have to control and to monitor the application of these actions. Another point that I would like also to take from your speech is the importance of cities. Urban areas and urban population from few years ago, 2010, 2011, for the first time, I think, in the history of human society, has passed the amount of rural population. So there are many more people living in the cities and in urban areas than in rural areas. And this will have a profound effect on many aspects of our life. I just can mention environmental education, for instance, and also the urban greening, urban forestry could be really, really important also in the future. And so connecting action and assessed information to, let's say, solution helps me to give the word and to give the floor to René Castro Salazar in his role as Assistant Director General of FAO, but also responsible of climate change and previous responsible of forests. So I'm sure that you will provide us with very interesting information about solutions. Please.
Thank you, Giuseppe and colleagues, friends from the Carabinieri and the Forest Service. Let me react to the IPCC and in particular to Abdullah's message. How UN will react to this new situation? How the countries should react, and organizations like yours. So first of all, quickly, again, the two main scenarios. By the year 2100, if we don't do anything, you know, what about here? If we don't do anything, we will be above 30,000, 35,000 tons or 30 gigatons of CO2. At that time, we will be 10 billion people. So that will mean more than 3 tons per capita. Today, we are a bit in the neighborhood of 2, and Latin America is in 6, US is in 17 per capita. And the scientists are telling us that the only way we can stabilize the atmosphere in the average temperature in 2 Celsius is if we stabilize in 10 gigatons, 1 ton per capita. 1 ton per capita. Is it doable? Is it possible? 10 billion people at that time. And we need to feed them. We need to, give them air conditioning and heaters and mobilization and all the new systems of food and we have a zero hunger commitment for 2030. We still have 1 billion people today in hunger, and we are committed that by 2030 there will be no hunger. So by 2100, that is already a given. 10 billion, zero hunger, 1 ton per capita. We have to do it, period. If we don't do it, this is what is going to happen. It's a collapse. It's not an economic problem. It's a collapse of human being. It's a collapse of the world we know. If we do, FAO, Milano, Is it doable? Well, we have to do more things like that. We need to plant more trees. We need to have buildings, greening buildings. We cannot waste any water. We cannot waste energy. We cannot waste any food. For Italy, that is not a big challenge. You have done it in moments of stress, in moments of need. The problem is that now we have to do it permanently, and we have to do it at the global level, or it will not be effective. So, for example, FAO will start with this proposal. In the next 10, 15 years, the sector that could respond quicker is agricultural. If you plant more trees, if you save water and fertilizers in agriculture, then you will emit less and you will capture more. If you manage better the soils, as the farmers know how to do, you capture carbon there. So in the next 10, 15 years, the main sector is agriculture and forestry. So reducing illegal logging, reducing forest fires, reducing waste of food will increase the blue part. And instead of going to the collapse possibility, we will be following a better path closer to the 1 ton per capita that the scientists are requiring us. So we will be working in these 3 ideas. Mainly, first one, how we help the countries working with us to do these actions better and to exchange support to one with the other. For example, I am from Costa Rica, and we wanted to fight forest fires in the way the US fight them. So we were considering to buy airplanes and to organize and do all that. But the Costa Rican forest is totally different of the US one. Our is evergreen, tropical. The US are pine trees with a lot of chemicals and resin that is a fuel. So we now know that the most relevant part is educating the people, not to burn the agricultural land and forget about it, so it will go to the forest, and to be vigilant during the dry season of the small fires from high-level platforms. Less intense in capital, more intense in human development, cultural change in the agricultural area. And it's been very successful. Costa Rica went almost from one of the highest rates in the world to, 10,000 hectares per year or something under control. Of course, using also remote sensing, satellite images for the heat places. And what we have to do also, we need to focus in the most vulnerable countries of the world. Small island states of the world, if we don't act, they will disappear as countries, and you will be dealing with more migrants that will not have passports, will not have territory. We all know that, and we are only witnessing them disappearing. Small island development states, Kiribati, Maldives in the Pacific, or St. Lucia, Grenada in the Caribbean. Some of them will go to the US, some of them will go to other Asian countries, some of them will come to Europe. So could you imagine now, if we don't do what we have to do, how the migratory flows will increase? We have already 250 million international migrants and 750 million internally displaced migrants. And we are only starting in this problem of droughts and destruction of livelihoods. So the countries propose this. Let's look at the difference per continent. For example, in the Americas, they propose that 94% of the actions in the next years will be for adaptation to climate. How to prepare for the droughts, how to prepare for the forest fires. And they said that 91% should be in mitigation. Like, Giuseppe was telling, let's plant more trees, let's do better agriculture. But look at this, 22% are already concerned about food insecurity and malnutrition. Already. I am from Costa Rica, small region here in Central America. We will pass from being net exporters of rice, beans, corn, beef, to be net importers very soon. So no wonder why this region is the one emitting more migrants to the US. That's why they want to build a wall there. And as you know, that will not work. How would you stop 1 or 2 million people per year suffering droughts, hunger, malnutrition, to look for whatever they can to save their life? And the other hot spot here, we can see it, 100% of the African countries, they think that they need to adapt to climate change. 100%. 96% of them, they will say, yeah, we also will contribute planting trees and do better agriculture. But we have to prepare ourselves. And the main challenge, 53% already, is food and nutrition. Look at the difference. 22 in the Americas, 52% in Africa. So we have to work with the root to keep the people in the homeland. Because the climate will exacerbate the already difficult conditions. And we know it. And then we are already working in this number of countries. You know, some of these countries already presented proposals. For example, in my region, you know, already we call it the dry corridor. They are already trying to restore the land, to plant trees better adapted and to the drought conditions, to use the wild relative of the rice that grows better in dry conditions than the nicer, higher yield producing that we imported from Asia. So we have to think again these possibilities. And FAO is working in all this territory. This is the second area for big migration potential. And also China, one of the biggest ones for internally displaced people for the same reasons. And then in Philippines and other regions also for dramatic, you know, an increase in the cyclones, in the hurricanes is destroying the livelihoods of the people. So, you know, if it damage a community here, you know, and we all suffer a matrici for another natural disaster, could you imagine the people that gets destroyed, the basic, you know, the livestock, the basic farms, and they only have that for the living possibilities. So, and this is the whole portfolio. But my final message is this. Rich or poor, big or small, developed or developing, we are all in the same planet. There is no way somebody will save itself. I'm a PhD from the US universities, from Harvard University. And there is a publication of people saying, well, using geophysicist possibilities, we can protect the US with an umbrella of clouds. And they publish it seriously in some of the journals. Yes, that will reduce the warming potential because the clouds do that. That's true. But how about the diseases and illness coming, you know, in the domestic animals, with the people, the new mosquitoes that never, ever before reach the center and the northern part of the US? Or the loss of the watersheds and the spreading of the wildfires? That is a systemic problem. So it doesn't matter, big or small, rich or poor, developed or developing, unless we act all globally with the resources we have. Some will do it because it's moral important and will preach by example, and others will follow, small countries, and some others because it has a big impact. But unless we do it, there is no possibility to tackle climate change. Thank you very much.
Thank you, René, for these very nice and, let's say, very active presentations about the strategy of FAO and the fact that you are already taking actions in order to, let's say, tackle the climate change issue. And the Green Climate Fund that René showed is a very important, very relevant tool that will help the world, particularly in the future, in order to, let's say, make the all the countries, but particularly the developing countries, reacting to climate change. One other issue that I think is very relevant from the presentation of Professor Castro is about the connection, the link between climate change, food and environmental insecurity, and political instability that at the end brings and basically is a driver, one of the main driver of the migration between countries and within countries. And of course this calls for also for action in those areas of instability, for instance in part of the African and Southern Mediterranean regions, and this is very close to us in Italy. And of course the role of the Carabinieri Forestali is very important, but I would also stress the point that we also have to act in those countries, and we have to use agriculture and forestry also in order to stabilize all this migration. So words like social agriculture and social forestry could become even more important in the future, and so there is a lot of work for all of us. Now, I think that we move to Ilaria Firmian, and she will present us also the strategy and role, I guess, of IFAD, the other Rome-based United Nations organization. Please.
IFAD to participate in this important conference. My topic, I think, will link well to Dr. Castro's presentation, and I will focus on climate change impacts on smallholder agriculture and on how smallholder farmers can adapt to climate change. And I hope this will also give some insights for tomorrow's panel on sustainable agriculture. Just for those of you who are not familiar with the International Fund for Agricultural Development, we are an international financial institution and at the same time a specialized UN agency. We are part of the 3 Rome-based agencies, so FAO, WFP, and IFAD. And our mandate is to eradicate rural poverty in developing countries. And our main clients are smallholder farmers. The main instruments that IFAD use are low-interest loans and grants to finance smallholder-focused agricultural development projects in collaboration with the national governments. And we have more or less a work plan of 1 billion per year. So as I said, agriculture is our main business, and agriculture plays a big role on climate change. I think it has already been highlighted by previous colleagues, but from the 5th IPCC report, we see that around a quarter of global greenhouse gas emissions are related to agriculture. And we actually saw this problem growing like in the 10 years from 2001 to 2011-15, a big growth happened in the agricultural emissions. Agriculture is also very vulnerable to climate change impacts. Therefore, we think that it is a big part of the problem, but it has the potential to be a big part of the solution. Just to focus a bit on the situation of the countries in which IFAD works, this slide shows the projected changes in agricultural productivity by 2080, based on the climate models and on the most common staple foods. And we can see that the countries which already have the biggest development problems are those that will suffer the most, so Latin America, Africa, South and Southeast Asia, while those countries that will have gain in agriculture for climate change will be more the Canada, Europe, and Central and Eastern Asia. So we can see that countries that have already less of economic opportunity, they have issues with food security. To those, climate change will add increased land degradation, water shortages, all issues that in turn can create conflicts. For example, we witness a lot of conflict between herders and farmers over natural resources. These conflicts in turn lead to issues such as displacement, internal displacement, and then migration. And we already touched at those points. But this is just to show how climate change is really compounding food security problems and will make it harder to feed a growing population, because we expect 2 more billion people on the planet by 2050. And we can see here that the percentage change in yield impact for the major staple food crops has already been decreasing from 1960 to 2013. But what is the role of smallholder farmers, which is IFAD's target group in all this? We estimate that there are more or less 500 million small farms in the world, and they provide the livelihood to 2 billion people. We tend to see smallholder farmers as people needing humanitarian assistance and being trapped in poverty. And of course, part of this picture is true, but we also have to consider that in most developing countries, smallholders can produce up to 80% of the food in the countries, which means that they play a central role in the economy and in the food security. It means that they own assets, they invest, they manage risk, and they market, and also that they extract and use natural resources. And this is where smallholder farmers are key in another way, because they live and work in some of the planet's most sensitive ecosystems, such as rainforest, mangrove forest, coral reefs. And this is where the environmentalists have seen from a long time a big number of problems, because if we overlap the maps of poverty, population density, they often coincide also with the map of high biodiversity areas. This means that these smallholders are, in a sense, the custodians of these ecosystems, and they have the possibility of playing a very important role in managing those ecosystems. But in the areas in which they live, climate change is currently amplifying the existing risk. In this slide, we can see that in the past, we had more or less every 10 years an extra dry or extra wet year. But this has really changed, and the peaks with this climate extreme now are happening much more often. And therefore, the losses and the damages in the real livelihood become bigger. And these peaks in the graph are those moments in which smallholder households have to take emergency measures to survive, such as taking children out of school, therefore impacting on the human capital of the country, or selling their assets, so being trapped back into poverty. And the historic experience and the traditional knowledge they had in agriculture is now no longer sufficient to cope with the scale of these extreme events. So what we say we need in IFAD is to transform smallholder agriculture into a system which is, on one side, more productive, meaning that it can produce food to feed a population of 9 billion people by 2050. Most of them will be in developing countries. More resilient, therefore able to absorb all the weather-related shocks, and that has a lower carbon footprint, meaning reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So for For IFAD perspective, the theory of change behind this transformation is that we need to empower smallholder farmers to seize the opportunities that are there for this transformation to happen. And this means recognizing that smallholders need to have access to information, to finance, to market, to technologies, and that they can make the food value chains in which they work more resilient to climate. I'll give you an example of what, this is really the core of IFAD work, making food value chains more resilient. And I'll give you an example of what we mean by that. Basically, you can imagine a value chain for maize in the Sahel. And a typical IFAD intervention will be around creating smallholder farmers cooperatives, providing them with access to credit, maybe build a processing plant, restore or build feeder roads that provide access to the market. But then if in such a context a drought happens and knocks out the harvest, the entire value chain starts shaking. Or if, for example, a heavy rain destroys the grain stock, or if a flood interrupts all the transport routes, and therefore there's no access to the market for the production. So what we try to do is to treat the value chain as an adaptive system and have adaptive actions at each step of the value chain. For example, we could use drought-resistant variety and production level. We support smallholder farmers to build storage systems that are resistant to flood, for example, and other type of climate-proof infrastructure. And we also increase the producer's knowledge of the market demand and price, and we try to reduce the transaction cost. In order to increase the resilience of the value chain, we normally take three main actions. The first one is related to better knowledge of the current and of the future risk. So basically, we undertake vulnerability analysis of the production based on climate models. It's very small there, but it's an example for Nicaragua, where we analyze the suitability of the coffee growing area by 2050. And all the red area is basically zones that are becoming much hotter and less suitable for coffee production. And this is a very important information for a government that relies on coffee export as one of their main engine for rural transformation. Another action that we take is better risk management along all the steps of the value chain. And this means adopting technologies which are not necessarily always new technologies, but sometimes technologies that are a bit out of the normal vision of the Ministry of Agriculture. And these include, for example, giving smallholders access to weather information, which normally stays with the hydrometeorological services, or also access to renewable energy, or to weather index insurance, therefore linking with the private sector. And lastly, we aim at building scale mechanism for natural resource management. That means bring to a much larger scale, possibly landscape level, technologies that are tried and tested and that we have been using already, and we know they are successful. And one of these examples is technologies for soil and water conservation and agroforestry. And I think I can show a quick video on a project of IFAD in Burkina Faso, which illustrates this aspect.
In Burkina Faso's Sahel region, Sabiri Kebre waits for rain. It's not a new story in this semi-arid part of West Africa, often plagued by drought, but according to local farmers here, weather patterns are changing.
The weather is changing and we're worried. Every day we must think about how we will survive. It affects our lives. It affects the environment. Trees are disappearing and there's a loss of soil fertility, so it's a big problem.
And scientists predict it will only get worse. Not only will farmers have to grow their sorghum and millet with less rainfall, but they'll also have to deal with greater variability of water flow.
Greater variability means that you might get 20–25% of the entire annual rainfall in one afternoon. So everything that you've planted is washed away.
With just one growing season and little more than 500 millimeters of rainfall per year, changes like this can spell disaster, as Kebre knows from experience.
10 years ago there was drought and serious famine. I had to sell everything I had, including my donkey cart, in order to buy food for the family.
To help farmers like Kebre adapt to climate changes, the UN's International Fund for Agricultural Development, or IFAD, has supported a number of projects that work together with farmers to develop soil and water retention techniques, like these half-moon-shaped pits. When the rain comes, they hold moisture more efficiently, and the manure added to the bottom increases soil fertility.
The real impact has been in the moisture retained in the soil, which means we are able to grow more crops. With the increased production, we are much more food self-sufficient.
Digging circular planting pits and building stone walls that prevent water runoff are part of the strategy. But the biggest payoff may come from planting trees. Tossing the cuttings from young bagana trees over a field improves the soil's nutrients for growing crops. But these trees also provide food for animals and people. Even more importantly, a compound released by leaves into the atmosphere actually stimulates the formation of clouds and rainfall. IFAD says up to 300,000 hectares of land in Burkina Faso have been recovered using these techniques, which is not only helping farmers adapt to climate changes, but increase their harvests.
On average, the harvest was 300–400 kilograms per hectare, or 600 kilograms at best. Today, with these techniques, production has been raised to 1,400 and 1,500 kilograms per hectare. So you see the difference. It's more than doubled.
From one of the few high spots near the town of Yako, it's evident what kind of impact farmers are having on greening the landscape. Yet farmers and scientists agree there's no room for complacency. It's predicted rainfall here will continue to decrease from 500 to around 310 millimeters per year. And as it does, these techniques will become even more crucial, says IFAD's Cristiana Sparaccino.
Without these techniques, we wouldn't be able to harvest the Sahel, and we wouldn't be able to produce enough to eat for the farmers and for the populations of Burkina Faso. And this is the way we need to go if we want to have self-sufficiency in agriculture production in the countries of the Sahel.
In the meantime, when the rain finally comes this year, farmers like Kebre will be ready.
Okay, thank you. So just as a conclusion, I think I have, let's say, three main take-home messages. The first one, since we have been talking about a collective action, the main one is that smallholders are part of this action, and they should not just be considered as victims of climate change, but as political stability. We talked about migration, and most importantly, reduction of poverty. Thank you.
Thank you, Ilaria. These beautiful also movies on activities, IFAD activities in Burkina Faso, so actions on the ground. Many points you touched. I just want to recall the stress and that you put on underlining the landscape approach. I think it is a very important concept not to focus on just single ecosystem, single farms, but having a landscape approach integrating all the different natural resources. So agriculture, forestry, natural environment, integrating the different resources like, for instance, water. I mean, water is becoming one of the main or the main natural resource for the future. And I mean, it can be very, very important, particularly also for our Mediterranean environment. We can see, for instance, this year that the rain amount, precipitation, for instance, in the Mediterranean, in Italy, is really quite low. The second point that I would like really to stress is that there are these 3 different United Nations organizations in Rome working at the global scale but based here, so FAO, IFAD, and the World Food Program. And sometimes in Italy we forget that we have these very, very important, let's say, institutions, technical institutions, providing actions and providing information for the decision level, but also operating worldwide. And I really think that, we always have to stress the need for more interaction between Italian institutions, Italian scientific organization, but also technical organization like the Carabinieri Forestali with these Rome-based United Nations agencies. And now is the time to give the floor to Richard Chollerton, who is from the Tetra Tech organization in US, but he was also the chief scientist for the risk analysis and climate change analysis for the World Food Program here in Rome. So please, Richard, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, and let me start by thanking the Carabinieri very much for inviting me to speak at this conference. It's fantastic to be back in Rome. The professor introduced me as the former chief scientist of WFP's climate change and risk reduction unit. I'm actually not a scientist, just the former chief. I'm an emergency manager by trade. Most of the last 20 years I've spent planning, organizing and responding to major disasters, many of them climate disasters. And I think, like many emergency services and public safety services like the Carabinieri, we typically are the ones who pick up the pieces when all else fails. And climate change really is an enormous threat to public safety and to our way of life, that if it's not dealt with, it's the emergency services and public safety services who will bear the brunt. We saw in Dr. Castro's presentation some of the things that will come if we fail. I personally started to get interested in climate change and environment because we kept responding to food crises in the same places year after year after year, in places like Ethiopia and Somalia and Niger. And when we started to look at what was causing them, we started to see, even 10 years ago or 15 years ago, trends in the climate were changing. In places that used to have a drought once every 10 years, you would see them every 5 years or every 4 years. And in certain places, like the Horn of Africa, you would see that you would find places with 7 out of 10 years below the minimum rainfall for adequate pasture generation for livestock. And you would see major food crises, but you would also see major conflicts. emerging in those places due to many factors, but certainly climate stress being one of them. So in trying to think through what I wanted to talk about today, given the focus of this panel is trying to give the international perspective on the impact of climate change, I wanted to try and share a few points. But before I get into that, let me just say that in my own process and the process that we went through in the World Food Programme as we started to address climate change, our fundamental objective was trying to understand these problems so we could figure out what new tools, what innovations, what new processes, what new analysis we needed to do in order to do our basic job of responding to more frequent floods, droughts, and storms, more frequent crises. And so what I hope, and what's really refreshing in this conference, is that you're able to take all of the things that you hear from all of the different panels and do just that for the Carabinieri and the Forest Service in Italy, where you already have so much tremendous capacity. So let me start with the conclusions. If there's three things that I would really like you to leave here remembering from what I've said, they're these three things. One is that food security, climate, and disasters are linked inexorably, and that the poorest people are the most vulnerable. The poorest people and poorest countries are the most vulnerable to that link between food insecurity, disasters, and climate. And I will explain a bit more of that. Number two, globally, the risks to food security and livelihoods and lives are accumulating at an unprecedented rate. The level of risk that we're seeing accumulate is unprecedented. We have more people with more assets, more money and more things, in more and more hazard-prone areas, with more climate disasters coming. And thirdly, we face two stark futures. As the Minister of Environment said in his opening remarks, either we all win or we all lose. And I want to show you a little bit of what that means in food security terms globally, what the consequences of success could be if we're able to achieve the goals set out in Paris, the Climate Change Agreement, in the Sustainable Development Goals, but also what happens if we fail. So first, food security, climate change, and disasters are linked, and the poorest and most vulnerable people face the highest levels of risk. There are 1.2 billion people in the world who live in extreme poverty. 1.2 billion. 900 million of them live in rural areas. It's true that more than half the world's population lives in urban areas, but the vast majority of the poorest people in the world live in rural areas. And the majority of those people depend on rainfall for their livelihood. They don't have very much irrigation, if any at all. They depend on the weather. And as the weather changes, their livelihoods are at stake. Of those 1.2 billion, about 800 million people are hungry. 800 million people go to bed hungry every night. 80% of those people live in countries that have both very high exposure to climate disasters and very high levels of environmental degradation and land degradation. So that even a small climate shock translates into a major impact on agriculture and lives and livelihoods. Droughts, floods, and storms destroy people's assets. They wash away their houses, livestock, food stores. They cover fields up with mud and make them unusable for periods of time. And the poorest people are most at risk. They don't have the tools to protect them from climate disasters. They don't live behind a dike. They don't have access to insurance. They have the least investment in soil and water conservation infrastructure, and they live in the most degraded landscapes and watersheds. You can see the impact of disasters not just on agricultural production or even on people's incomes and their access to food, but you can see it in nutrition as well, in people's nutrition. In Niger, if you were born during a drought year, no matter where you live in Niger, you're 50% more likely to be stunted. In other words, you don't grow as a child as much as you should, and you're shorter, you have lifelong impacts on brain function and many other health issues. If you are born in Bangladesh and affected by floods, not only do you face higher rates of acute malnutrition, what we call wasting, in other words, starving, you also face lifelong impacts on your health and nutrition and have higher rates of stunting. In the Philippines, in the 2 years after a typhoon, 15 times as many infants die than do during the typhoon itself. Let me just say that again. In the 2 years after a typhoon, 15 times as many kids die as die in the event itself. 80% of them are girls. Disasters have a tremendous impact on food security, nutrition, and livelihoods. Number 2, global risks are increasing at an unprecedented rate. We've talked a lot about climate change, and climate change is a major factor in that increasing risk. But along with climate change, you have population growth, urbanization, and development in a good way, but development in a good way that means that you have more people living in places that are exposed to more hazards, quite often surrounded by more environmental degradation, which makes those hazards more impactful. Climate disasters cost, on average, $100 billion a year globally. That's estimated to double by 2030. Already we see the impact of climate change. In the last decade, approximately $600 billion has been lost because of hydrometeorological disasters alone. That is double the previous decade. So in the last decade, the losses from disasters has doubled, and it's set to double again by 2030. That all is in the face of this challenge that has been mentioned a few times, that we'll have 9 billion people to feed by 2030. We'll have to produce 50% more food. And we'll have to do it in a way that doesn't increase emissions. Global food production has never gone up, well, not for the last 20 or 30 years, by more than 2%. So for those of you who are good at math, you can try and figure out, can we get 50% improvement in food production in the next 20 years at 2% growth? It's going to be very difficult. It's going to require a massive, massive effort. At the same time, other factors like conflict are affecting food security and livelihoods all over the world. Although there are fewer conflicts now, about half the conflicts that there were 10, 15 years ago, they have become more intense. The number of people killed per year in conflicts has gone up by twofold, and they're longer. They're longer in duration, more persistent crises like Somalia and Syria and Yemen. And those conflicts are not immune from climate stress as well. In fact, they quite often exacerbate it. When we tried to figure out globally how many people were affected by drought over the last 30 or 40 years, it became impossible because the statistics are so intertwined with conflict. West African famine in the 1970s and 80s, Ethiopia in the 70s and 80s, Somalia for the last 20 years. Drought crisis and conflict all together exacerbating it. Okay, so number 3. We face increasing risk. Food security and climate are linked. What will happen next? At WFP, when I was the chief, we really tried to understand what win or we all lose. We basically face 2 futures. The Paris Agreement says that we have to do 2 things. We have to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions to deal with the root causes of climate change. But because climate change is happening and will continue to happen, everything we do today to reduce greenhouse gas emissions will have no real effect until 2050. We've already put so much greenhouse gases into the environment that the climate will continue to change regardless of our actions today. And after 2050, things will become very different. Either it gets much worse or potentially it gets better. So, if we're able to deal with emissions, we're able to bring emissions down to this low point that we talked about earlier in the panel, and we're able to make the massive investments in sustainable development that we've committed to as a global community, then by 2050, things will start to get a little better. I don't know if you can see the colors changing on the map. Perhaps we could turn some of the lights down. It might be easier. By 2080, things could get a lot better. I don't know if you can see the colors, okay. Overall vulnerability to food insecurity from climate will decrease compared to today if we're successful in achieving the sustainable development goals and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. If we're not, a very different future emerges. If emissions are high and we don't invest anything in adaptation, by 2050, the map gets a lot redder. Vulnerability to food insecurity goes up significantly, and it goes up especially in Africa and South Asia. By 2080, all over the world, vulnerability to food insecurity goes up. You can barely see the world because it's so dark in the map on the screen. There we go. So let's just look again there. This is today's vulnerability. You see it's concentrated primarily in Africa and South Asia. In a worst-case scenario, if we continue to emit very high emissions and we don't adapt, we all lose. If we're successful and we have low emissions and high adaptation, by 2080, things improve over today. As Dr. Castro said, we have a global commitment to achieve zero hunger, that no person goes to bed hungry by 2030. If we're able to achieve the kind of sustainable development changes in our use of energy and emissions of greenhouse gases that we know we need to do, then achieving and maintaining zero hunger is possible. It's going to be hard work, no doubt. The amount of effort and energy and investment across all sectors of life, but especially agriculture and food security, is going to be huge. If not, it's very difficult to see how we can maintain zero hunger. We'll face a world where famine is a constant threat. So, Either we all win or we all lose. That's all I have. I wanted to just make those three points again. Food security, climate, and disasters are linked. Global risks are accumulating at an unprecedented rate. If we don't take massive action now, we won't solve the problem. And it's you and us who will be left dealing with the consequences to public safety and the environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. And if you can overlap the map of food insecurity that Richard showed us with the political instability, I mean, the parallel is really striking. So we have ethical, let's say, challenges ahead, but also somehow these challenges are also really regarding all of our lifestyle. And so security, monitoring, controlling should go hand in hand with technical operations also in these specific countries that in part at least are very close to the Mediterranean, very close to us. And so the last speech will be, I think, about security. And so, please, Dr. MacDonald, the floor is yours.
Excellent timing, thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Can I start by saying a very warm thank you to Commander General and to the Carabinieri for inviting me to speak to you today. It's a great honour for me to be part of this event, such an important event, and before such an important audience. Also like to thank our moderator for his kind introduction. You promoted me to doctor. I'm not a doctor and I'm not a scientist. You've heard 4 excellent presentations already today from my fellow panellists all about climate change, and I'm going to just change direction a little. So my presentation will be about, principally about environmental crime, and the main theme will be partnership and collaboration. But I want to say a little bit about my own organisation. You'll see from your programmes that I'm the chairman of an advisory board to Interpol on environmental compliance and enforcement. But my day job is as an executive director of the Scottish Environment Protection Agency. And in 2014, my agency was handed a new piece of legislation by the Scottish Government. And that piece of legislation gave us some new strong enforcement tools, but also gave us a statutory purpose which describes what SEPA is supposed to do. And in short, that statutory purpose states that SEPA has to protect and improve the environment in Scotland in ways that, as far as possible, also create health and well-being benefits and sustainable economic growth. Now, looking back to the 20th century, environmental regulation was all about reducing gross pollution, particularly from industrial sources. And a number of licensing and permitting systems were put in place. Now, like many other environment protection agencies, SEPA's performed fairly well with this. And nowadays, most of the industrial premises that we regulate perform pretty well, so they're either rated as good or excellent, with only a very small minority you would describe as poor or very poor. But there's one sector, there's one industry sector which is very different, and that's the waste management sector. And we have a big problem in Scotland and in many other countries where unlicensed operators have a very poor performance. It's much more about unlicensed operators, illegal and organised criminals and gangs. So that's a very different sector. Now, this is a very busy and detailed slide, and I'm not going to go through it in detail because of the shortage of time here, but basically this is about the circular economy, where waste becomes a resource and a problem becomes an opportunity. Now, my organisation, SEPA, has also recently published a new regulatory strategy. And again, time doesn't permit me to go into detail, but I would encourage you to seek it out on the internet and on the SEPA website, and I'm pretty confident that you'll be quite impressed by its contents. My organisation has also produced a new waste to resources framework with 4 significant desired outcomes. And given the subject of my talk today, I particularly point to the one that's bottom left, where we have an aim, an ambitious aim, to eradicate waste crime. So this means, in practice, SEPA wants to ensure that no waste producers use illegal sites or unauthorised waste collectors. That everyone understands and is prepared to pay the proper market rate for a fully legally compliant waste disposal service, that waste sites are not abandoned, leaving public authorities to pick up the bill, and finally, that organised crime groups are removed from the waste industry. Now, I just want to show you a couple of pictures which are examples of waste crime in Scotland. The 3 very handsome gentlemen in the top left are members of an organised crime group. They were running a waste management facility, but that was a front for a very significant drugs operation. And my officers, in collaboration with officers from Police Scotland, closed that facility down, and these 3 gentlemen are now spending time in prison, convicted of their significant waste and drugs crimes. The picture top right shows the problem that we have with waste tyres. Now, that's a sector that has almost been totally taken over by organised criminals who've used violence and intimidation to shift legitimate operators out of the sector, and they have just about completely taken over, and that's a big challenge for us. You'll see the headline, Mafia crime gangs targeted over illegal waste disposal. The term mafia was actually said in the Scottish Parliament when we were describing to them the organised crime involvement in the waste sector. And finally, the bottom right slide is a picture of a warehouse in central Scotland. And this is another tactic that organised criminals in Scotland take up. They lease warehouses, they fill them with waste, and then they just walk away and leave them, or worst case scenario, they set them on fire, as that particular picture shows. Now, it's very obvious to us in SEPA that even with our full range of enforcement powers and influence, that's not enough to deal with the waste crime problem. The Scottish Government also recognised this and established in 2014 an Environmental Crime Task Force, which I now chair. And this is a multi-agency partnership group which follows the Interpol National Environment Security Task Force model to help tackle Scotland's biggest environmental crime problem, which is illegal waste activity. And you'll see from the slide the logos of the various organisations that are involved in it. So we have Scottish Government, we have the tax authorities, ourselves, SEPA, our colleagues in Police Scotland, we have the prosecutors, we have local authorities, the Border Force and the Traffic Commissioner. So it's a partnership effort. If there's a message that I would like you to take away today from my short contribution to the event, it would be about the importance of working in partnership, both in terms of within individual countries, but also international. And it's really important that all partners share common goals and benefit from that collaboration. The value of environmental crime is now growing at a rate of 3 times that of the global economy, according to a report recently released by UNEP and Interpol. And estimates of the value of environmental crime range from between 91 and 258 billion US dollars. And this is 26% higher than was previously estimated as recently as 2014. Now, even at the low end of that range, it's plain to see that this has outpaced the growth of the illegal trade in small firearms to become the 4th largest criminal enterprise in the world after drugs, smuggling, counterfeiting and human trafficking. This picture is actually about international collaboration. That might not be immediately obvious to you. But this picture was taken a year ago in my home city of Glasgow. It's a gathering of Interpol's environmental plan, the English Environment Protection Agency. It consists of, the ECEC consists of the chiefs of environmental regulation and enforcement bodies from Interpol's 190 member countries. Some of these people are environmental protection people like myself, some are police officers, different countries have different structures. The role of the ECEC is to provide advice and guidance to Interpol on environmental crime priorities and on best practice. In Singapore in 2015, a new advisory board was elected, and I was honoured to join that board and then become chair of it. There are representatives on the advisory board from South Africa, from Netherlands, from Nigeria, from Sri Lanka, India, Peru, Chile, the United States, and last but not least, Italy, in the form of General Donato Monaco. I've been absolutely delighted and honoured to be chairing this group. And as I say, we had our latest meeting earlier this week in Rome, and I understand Donato will provide you with more detail of what happened at that meeting later on in today's agenda. I'm also delighted that another member of the advisory board is in the audience today, Deborah Harris, who's sitting over there, who is a solicitor, a lawyer working for the United States Justice Department. And again, Deborah will speak later in the agenda. So in addition to the advisory board, the ECEC also has 3 environmental crime working groups covering the areas of fisheries crime, wildlife crime and pollution crime. And again, it's pleasing to see the chair of the Pollution Crime Working Group, Joe Pooks, from the US Justice Department here. And again, you'll hear from him. The working groups are where the real work is done. The working groups are about international operational collaboration, with examples being Operation Thunderbird, which was about countering poaching, illegal harvesting, illegal trade related to wildlife and forestry. And the Pollution Crime Working Group's imminent 30 days of action, which is about tackling waste crime. Now, I'm very pleased to have an Italian involvement on the advisory board, and I want to pay tribute to Donato Monaco's involvement. He's made a very strong contribution, and I hope very much that he's able to continue on the board. The full ECEC meets every 2 years, and our next meeting is in Edinburgh in November this year, in partnership with the World Forum for Natural Capital. I very much hope that will be a successful event, supported by as many of Interpol member countries as possible. And I sincerely hope that Italy will be amongst the countries represented. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Callum, also for touching very important issue that I am sure are quite close to the activities of the Carabinieri. And I think also that it's very important what you stress, the need for collaboration, cooperation, but also communication. And these are two points that should go hand in hand if we want to, let's say, have the general public opinion in the countries and in the world and the political level to be really, let's say, involved in tackling these challenges that we have ahead. I think that since we are really in not Italian but Swiss punctuality,
sharp as usual.
If the chairman can give us a premium of just 1-2 minutes for
but
questions.
Only to the moderator. You can take, but the panelists as well. You have to take, please, the present with you, and we go together with the other panelists present in the room for the picture, the family picture with the general commander.
Okay. Can I make one question or?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes, please. We are here for you.
Thanks a lot. If you have 1 or 2 questions, just prepare them. Be ready. I would like, if it is possible, just to make one question to the Moxit, Abdallah Moxit from the IPCC. You showed, very, as I said, updated information of what is occurring and how the climate change, let's say, trend is being assessed by the IPCC. You showed data at the global scale. I would like to ask you if there are regional differences in the world, and particularly what's the situation and which are the forecasts for the Mediterranean region.
Thank you very much for this question. You're totally right, because now, as far as the information, as I said, we are making assessment of research. And we start by doing global assessment research. And you're right, if we take some maps, some outputs from IPCC 5 assessment report, Mediterranean region are the same, with same color in the global outputs. But, and this is something which is very important in the past and also in the future. In the past, IPCC, through outreach, encourages many simulation at regional level. For example, not only for Mediterranean, but also for some region in Africa, in Europe, in Americas, and others. And what is very important is an advice to take the information from IPCC and to go through downscaling approach. And there are 2 kinds of downscaling, the dynamical one and also to the statistical one. And I can give you, as example, from the IPCC simulation, if you can take a region like Mediterranean and specific to Morocco, while in the global picture, the increase is about an average of 2 degrees Celsius in the region of Morocco. When we do downscaling, we have a sort of good traceability between the western part and also eastern part, northern part and southern part, that goes from 0 anomaly to 5 anomaly. For the Mediterranean, I think this is the same feature that we have in Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, and also south of Europe, like Spain, France, and Italy, and so on. And also, as far we are, having some traces, we have a good variability inside those outputs. The last thing, which is very important also, and we did it, mention it, is the rhythm, the acceleration of the rhythm of extreme events. Also, observation and also forecast demonstrated that there is already an acceleration of the rhythm of extreme event, and it is also forecasted. The last thing which is very important, and as I said, 2 weeks ago we did have this scoping meeting about the 6th assessment report. And one main area which was asked by governments is to introduce regionalization, this time not only in the global result, but in the report itself. And this is added, we have regionalization, cities, rural, and some ecosystem, and also we have requests to deal with sustainable development goal and also global stocktake. Those are the future aspects to be assessed by IPCC. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. Si sente? Sì, okay. Yeah, well, I don't know who can answer this question. I'm Senator Orellana from the Italian Senate, and my question is how is considered the impact of everything is below our Earth? So I mean geothermal energy, volcanic activity, minery also. So if this is considered is an impact on climate change. This is very simple. A second question is possible if there is any cooperation with the European Union, because I knew that we have 3 important agencies in Rome, and but also we have part of European Union, and we follow the rules. I'm member of the Committee of European Affairs, so I'm quite interested for this. Thank you.
So far, it's been proven mainly that the volcanic activity, earthquakes, and other natural disasters are not related with climate change. However, volcanic ashes and eruptions can provide temporary umbrellas, and they cool the world, for 1, 2, or 3 years. That confused the scientists many years, because, for example, when the volcano Pinatubo in Philippines exploded, we had for 3 or 4 years a cooling period. So that was considered, that was a proof that there was not warming. Now we know better, and we call those nuances in the general explanations.
I don't know if there are other questions. One, two more, and that's it. Una lassù.
Good afternoon. I think my question is not directly to any of you in particular, but I guess anyone can answer. I'm currently researching on the green economy, so I was pretty interested in what do you think about the degrowth paradigm. This is because we know we live in a world of finite resources, and even though the economy has grown fourfold, we know there are still 1.2 billion people in hunger, while the average of each citizen has been shown that is consuming too much. So compared to the developed world, who is over-consuming their resources, this overconsumption is hindering and jeopardizing the opportunity for developing countries to develop, which they need to do it because still a major part of the population do not have access to basic needs. So my question is, what do you think about the degrowth paradigm, if it is feasible in developed countries, and what are the opportunities that this gives for the growth in developing countries? Also considering the fact that the only year greenhouse gases emission has diminished was in 2008, which was of economic recession. So that was my question. Thank you.
I'm not familiar with the specific paradigm, but I mean, I think your overall point is a very valid one. In the West, we use 35 times the energy of people in the developing world. And although emissions are going down for the first time in the developed world, and you know, in the last few years, we've gone from a place where the developed world emitted more than the developing world. That's now changed, and the developing world now emits more than the developed world. At the same time, there's a global social issue of income inequity that I think many societies are trying to grapple with. So how do you, in places like India and China and Brazil and other developing countries, get to a standard of living and well-being and sustainability that we consider acceptable with an energy path that doesn't continue to affect or drive climate change, and also starts to reduce it. And so there's a lot of challenges there, and that's different paths for different places, I think, are really important. I will say more specifically that agriculture and food security are really important in this discussion. Somebody mentioned that agriculture accounts for 1/4 of global emissions. When you take into account the food supply chain and transport and processing, it accounts for up to 1/3, and that's going to increase over time. So dealing with that is one issue. Agriculture is one of the only sectors with forestry that can take greenhouse gases out of the environment. So it's not just about reducing greenhouse gases. Agriculture can be a much more powerful solution. And agriculture has proven to be the single most effective way of reducing poverty. Rural development reduces poverty. And so however we do this and whatever it looks like in different countries, agriculture and food systems have to be at the center of the discussion, not only of environment and climate change, but also of poverty and social equity. Thanks.
I don't know if Ilaria or René wants also to add one point. So we go to the last question. Okay, so thanks a lot. I think that we had really 5 outstanding presentations, really updated and connected with the different challenges that we are facing ahead, and also with the different parts of the world. So I really would like to ask you to give a big applause to the 5 panelists.
Thank you, President. I remember all panelists. Now we go for the family picture. All the other panelists as well. We have a light lunch. See you back in the room at 14:30. Thank you very much for the next panel.